Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is Ed Versluis from James Walker. Today I would like to demonstrate how to correctly tighten flange connections. And before we tighten it, we need to assemble it to make the alignment correct. I'm using the Famos rig today, and the Famos rig is an DN100 PM40 and has 8 M20 studs with a load indicating fasteners. So therefore we can immediately see live on the screen the bolt load in each bolt, and therefore you can see the crosstalk on the flange connection. What we want to achieve is a bolt load in this flange of 300 kilonewton. As we have 8 bolts, is around 38 kilonewton per bolt, and by achieving that we use the torque wrench to a torque value of 135 newton meters. The first step is of course changing the gasket. I've installed a spiral wound gasket. It's already hand tied, pre-assembled, and I lubricated the studs with Jet Loop 550 Extreme. And I have also measured with a caliper the flange gaps on 4 spots, K1, K2, K3, K4, and recorded already the flange gaps. The largest gap is at K4, which is bolt number 7. Later on you will see bolt number 7 here. There's this location, and the gap is 6.2 millimeters. Now what we want to do is, if the gap here is larger at bolt number 7, we start at bolt number 7. Because if we start on the opposing side, the gap will only be larger. So the next step is that before we tighten the flanges in the different passes, I'm going to use first the hand spanner to tighten 4 bolts in across to, let's say, 10% of the torque. And I'm using only a nut rotation of 30 degrees, not more, on each stud, otherwise we get too much misalignment. So this is 30 degrees. 30 degrees, you can see already that bolt number 3, the bolt load increase. Bolt number 1, this one is not so tight, so bolt number 1. Okay, so now I have already pre-tightened 4 bolts, therefore the gasket is slightly compressed. The next pass will be done with a torque wrench. I'm going to apply 40 newton meter. The first pass is 40 newton meter, that is around 30% of the final torque. And I'm going to apply a cross pattern on the bolts. Again, I start from bolt number 7. That was the largest gap. So here we start. Okay, so I'm going first bolt 7, then bolt number 3. Now I continue in the cross, bolt number 1 and bolt number 5. Now 4 bolts in a cross, that means the bolt is tightened now to 40 newton meter, and as you can see, the bolt load we achieved on those 4 bolts is around 10 kilonewton. So we have 40 kilonewton in the flange. We need to increase that to 300 kilonewton. Okay, the next step is that we have done now the uneven bolts. The next step is we go for the even bolts. So I'm starting at bolt number 8. I'm tightening those first hand tight. So they're hand tight. So starting from bolt number 8 now. Then we use the opposing bolt number 4. And while we tighten bolt number 4, bolt number 3 and 5 is dropping a little bit. So we have done 8, 4. Now we continue with bolt number 2. And bolt number 6. Okay. As you can see, the even bolts are also tightened now, again to around 10 kilonewton. The uneven bolts were before tightened to 10 kilonewton, but dropped now in average to 5 kilonewton. So they lost around 50% of the bolt load what they had before. That's what we call crosstalk or elastic interaction. And that is because the gasket is compressing more by tightening the even bolts, and hence the reason the uneven bolts will lose in tension. Okay, so the first pass is applied. 40 Newton meter. Now I'm going to 80 Newton meter, and we start again from bolt number 7. Okay, 20 kilonewton, pretty straightforward. Bolt number 3, the opposing bolt, and now we do bolt number 1. Click. When the tool says click, immediately stop with torquing. Now bolt number 5. Click, stop. As you can see, the total load is already increased now to 100 kilonewton. We have tightened now the uneven bolts. We now continue on the even bolts with the same level of torque, 80 Newton meter. So I start at bolt number 8. Okay, the opposing bolt is number 4. Bolt number 2. And bolt number 6. Okay, so this was pass 2, 80 Newton meter, which is 60% of the total torque. The next step is pass 3, where we go to 100% of the final torque, which is the 135 Newton meter. So I applied 135 Newton meter. I can continue now on bolt number 7. Okay. You can see we are moving towards the target of 38 kilonewton on this bolt. Bolt number 3. Bolt number 1. And bolt number 5. Okay, the uneven bolts are tightened now to the final torque. What you can see is that the even bolts dropped again back to just around 10 kilonewton, which is potentially around 30% of the load. So therefore we continue now on bolt number 8, bolt number 4, bolt number 2, and while we tighten bolt 2, bolt number 1 and 3 is dropping again. And now number 6. Okay, we finalize now the tightening passes 1, 2 and 3. We have applied 100% of the total torque to the flange connection, but only the even bolts are quite accurately tightened. The uneven bolts dropped tremendously. Many mechanics stop with tightening the flange now. They think they are finished. And that's what I want to show today, is we are not finished now. We go now and we continue in pass number 4, but we are no longer working in the cross pattern, but we go for a circular pattern. Clockwise or counterclockwise, what do you prefer? Doesn't matter in this case. So I'm starting again bolt number 7 and I'm following the clock. You can see bolt number 7 is tight now. Bolt number 8. I have relatively low nut rotation on the even bolts and more on the uneven bolts. You will see I have more rotation now on the uneven bolts. Here we're a little bit rotation. Now again a lot. And while I tighten 3, 2 and 4 is dropping again. 5, 6 and 7. Okay, this was pass 4 to 100% of the final torque, 135 Newton meters. But we are not finished now. As during tightening pass number 4, the majority of the nuts were moving. That means we are not finished. We need to tighten more in order to compress the gasket correctly. Starting at bolt number 7, tight, tight, so again we are now in pass 5 already, and as you can see we have still nut rotation and movement. That means we are not finished now at pass number 5. We need to continue to pass number 6. Luckily we have a lot of space here, there is no obstruction, so there is still movement. As there is still movement, we have to go to pass number 7 now. Tight. Perfect. This boulder joint connection is very nicely and uniformly compressed. You can see that on the bolt loads. The majority of the bolt loads are around 30 kilonewton each. In total we have 250 kilonewton achieved. Slightly lower as a target of 300. The reason for that is that the friction is slightly higher as what we expected in the torque value calculation. But this boulder joint connection is good enough to go. And the most important thing is that all the bolts are accurately tightened around the 30 kilonewton. So therefore the gasket is uniformly compressed. Now the only thing what is left now is the end check. And I'm going to use first of all the caliper to measure the gaps. This is K1. It's 5.2. K2, 5.2. And the last one, 5.2. Wow! You can see by following the right tightening patterns, working in nice steps, not to rotate the nuts too much in the beginning, 30 degrees. We have aligned the flange very nicely to 5.2 millimeters. That means the gasket saw a compression of around 0.7, 0.8 millimeters. I hope you enjoy it. You can see the flange is very nicely tightened. But while we speak, we lost already 3 kilonewtons, and that's another thing what we can show here. That when we were finalizing, the load is still dropping. Yeah? That means it is always wise to re-tighten the bolts after 4 to 24 hours. Okay, thanks a lot.